This 4-year-old beggar girl sees a millionaire being put in a pot on the fire. But she saw everything and does something that shocked everyone. Watch until the end. Comment telling me what you thought of this story with a rating from 0 to 10. I really want to know if you liked my story, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The midday sun punished the dusty streets of Harmony Creek when Lily woke up under the awning of St. Joseph's Bakery. Her 4 years of life had been marked by constant hunger and abandonment. But on that Tuesday morning, something different hung in the hot Texas air. Her tangled brown hair stuck to her dirt-smudged face as she rubbed her eyes, trying to ward off the fatigue of another night spent sleeping outdoors. The little girl got up unsteadily, her torn and dirty clothes a stark contrast to the morning bustle of the town. Her bare feet knew every stone on those sidewalks, every pothole she might trip over, every corner where shopkeepers used to throw out leftover food. It had been 2 weeks since she'd had a decent meal, surviving only on crumbs and water from the public fountain. Lily walked the streets with the silent determination of someone who had learned from a very young age that survival depended solely on herself. Her earliest memories were fragmented. A woman with dark hair who hummed softly, the smell of fresh coffee in the morning, and then just emptiness. No one in town could explain how such a small child had ended up on the streets, but everyone was already used to her discreet presence. That morning, while searching for bread scraps in the dumpster behind the bakery, Lily heard the rumble of a truck driving away toward the countryside. Something in her empty stomach made her follow the sound, walking along the dirt road that led to the ranches on the outskirts of town. Maybe she would find fallen fruit on the ground, or maybe a kind rancher would give her a piece of cheese. The walk lasted almost an hour under the scorching sun. Lily stopped from time to time to rest in the shade of the trees lining the road, but an inexplicable force kept her from turning back. It was as if something important was calling her forward, a strange feeling she had never experienced before. When she neared a ranch enclosed by a chain-link fence, Lily heard raised voices coming from a wooden shed at the back of the property. They were male shouts filled with anger and desperation. A child's natural curiosity overcame her fear, and she squeezed through a gap in the fence, cautiously approaching the source of the sounds. What she saw left her paralyzed with a mixture of terror and fascination. Through a dirty window, she observed 2 men in a scene her young mind could barely process. One of them, older and dressed in expensive clothes, was being forced by the other toward a gigantic pot boiling over a makeshift fire. The smell of hot metal and smoke reached her hiding spot. "Where's the money, Walter? You've got 5 seconds before you find out what it's like to be boiled alive," shouted the younger man, pushing the other toward the steam rising from the pot. His words were loaded with a violence that made Lily tremble behind the wooden wall. Walter Sullivan, 52, a respected businessman in the region, never imagined his day would begin with him being threatened by Jack Barnes, his 45-year-old former partner. Jack's face was contorted with rage, the veins in his neck bulging as he held a metal rod in his hands. "I've told you 1,000 times, Jack. I didn't take any money from the company. You've gone completely insane." Walter tried to dodge, his hands trembling as the hot steam from the pot burned his skin. "Liar! $300,000 disappeared from the company account the same week you took that trip to Dallas. A coincidence? There are no coincidences when it comes to you, Walter." Jack advanced another step, forcing Walter to lean dangerously over the pot. Lily watched everything with wide eyes, her small heart beating erratically in her chest. Even without fully understanding the situation, she sensed that the man in expensive clothes was in real danger. Something inside her, a protective instinct she didn't know she possessed, began to pulse strongly. "Please, Jack, think about what you're doing. We've been partners for 15 years. We built this company together," Walter pleaded. sweat pouring down his face as he tried to keep his balance. Partnership? You destroyed our partnership when you decided to rob me. Sebastian showed me the receipts, Walter. You transferred the money to a shell account. Jack pushed Walter harder, causing his legs to buckle dangerously close to the boiling water. It was at that moment that Lily noticed a bucket of cold water left near the back door. Without thinking of the consequences, just following an impulse she couldn't explain, she ran silently to the bucket and lifted it with all her diminutive strength. The weight of the water nearly toppled her, but she managed to balance the container over her head. With a desperate movement, Lily poured all the cold water onto the flames heating the pot. The result was a deafening explosion of steam and smoke that instantly filled the room. Walter took advantage of the confusion to move away from the pot, while Jack yelled in surprise and anger. "Who's there? Who did that?" Jack bellowed through the curtain of steam, his eyes frantically searching for whoever was responsible for the interruption. Lily tried to run, but her bare feet slipped on the wet floor. When the steam finally cleared, she was lying on the shed floor, her clothes soaked and her big eyes staring at the two men who were now looking at her with total astonishment. "A child," Walter muttered, still breathless and shaking. "My God, where did she come from?" Jack looked at Lily with a mixture of fury and disbelief. His plans had been ruined by a dirty, malnourished girl who shouldn't have been there. But now she had seen everything, knew too much about what was happening in this isolated place. "She saw everything, Walter. Now we have two problems to solve," Jack said, his voice taking on a cold, calculating tone that made Lily shrink even further on the wet floor. The silence that followed Jack's sentence was broken only by the sound of water drops dripping from the shed's ceiling. Lily remained motionless on the floor, her large eyes shifting between the two men watching her. Walter was clearly shaken, his hands still trembling from the scare, while Jack coldly calculated his next moves. "Listen here, little girl," Jack said, crouching in front of Lily with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You didn't see anything here today, nothing at all, understand?" His voice was deceptively gentle, but it carried a veiled threat that made the girl shrink even more. Lily nodded her head quickly, but something in her intelligent eyes indicated she understood much more of the situation than she let on. At 4 years old, life on the streets had taught her to read people's intentions through their gestures and tones of voice. Walter approached slowly, still catching his breath. "She's just a child, Jack. Look at the state she's in. She's hungry, probably lost." He reached out a hand to help Lily up, but she recoiled instinctively. "That's precisely why she's dangerous," Jack retorted, standing up and pacing nervously around the shed. "Kids talk without thinking, and this one saw you almost ending up in the soup. If she tells anyone—" "I won't tell," Lily whispered, finally finding her voice. Her words came out shaky, but there was an unexpected determination in them. "I promise I won't tell anyone." Jack laughed bitterly. "A promise from a street kid? Do you think I was born yesterday, Walter?" He walked over to a table where he had left his car keys. "I'm taking her far away from here. Problem solved." "No!" Walter placed himself between Jack and Lily, surprising himself with his own reaction. "You're not laying a finger on her. What you tried to do to me is enough. She saved your life, Walter. I'll give her that. But now she's a witness." Jack pocketed the keys, but didn't move forward. "You were always too weak to make the tough decisions. That's why our company is in the state it's in." Lily watched the two men argue, her small hands clutching her wet clothes. Something in her mind began to work differently, as if the pieces of a puzzle were arranging themselves. Every word, every gesture, every expression on the men's faces was being recorded with impressive clarity. "You said $300,000 went missing," Lily said suddenly, causing both men to turn to her. "On Tuesday morning last week." Walter and Jack looked at each other, perplexed. "How do you know that?" Walter asked, crouching down to the girl's level. "I was sleeping under the bank window when you," she pointed at Jack, "were yelling on the phone at someone. You said Sebastian had discovered the transfer from Tuesday morning." Jack's face went pale. He had indeed made that call outside the bank, but he never imagined anyone could have overheard, let alone a seemingly invisible little girl from the town. "Are you sure about that?" Walter pressed, realizing there was something special about this child's observational skills. "I'm sure. You also said you were going to settle everything today, even if I have to use drastic measures," Lily continued, her voice gaining confidence. "And you said a name, Marlene, that she couldn't know anything." Jack took a step back, visibly shaken. Marlene was Walter's wife, and he had indeed mentioned that she shouldn't find out about the company's financial situation. How could this girl remember such specific details? "Little girl, how old are you?" Walter asked, fascinated by the precision of the information. "4, Lily answered simply. "But I remember everything I see and hear. I always have." Walter felt a shiver run down his spine. In his years as a businessman, he had learned to recognize special talents, and he was facing something extraordinary, a 4-year-old with a perfect photographic memory. "That's impossible," Jack muttered, but his voice betrayed his uncertainty. "She's making it all up to get attention." Then test her," Walter suggested, a plan beginning to form in his mind. "Ask her something only you would know." Jack hesitated for a moment, then looked directly at Lily. "On Monday, I had lunch at a specific restaurant. What was the name of the restaurant?" Lily closed her eyes for a few seconds, as if accessing files organized in her mind. "You didn't have lunch at a restaurant on Monday. You ate a ham sandwich inside your car, parked across from Mr. Benedict's hardware store. It was 2:30 in the afternoon." The silence that followed was deafening. Jack knew she was absolutely correct. He had spent his lunch hour watching Walter's movements, eating a sandwich he had bought at the bakery. "My God," Walter whispered, "she really saw you following me." "How can you remember all that?" Jack asked, his initial hostility being replaced by a disturbed curiosity. Lily shrugged, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I always paid attention to everything. When you don't have a home, you need to know where the dangerous people are, where there's food, who might help. My head just keeps everything." Walter stood up slowly, processing the implications of what he had discovered. This girl wasn't just a witness to what had happened that day. She was potentially the key to solving the entire mess his company was in. "Jack, you said you have proof that I stole the money. What proof is that?" "Sebastian showed me the bank statements, your signature authorizing the transfer," Jack replied, still eyeing Lily with suspicion. "I never signed any transfer for $300,000, Walter stated flatly. "And if this girl can remember conversations she overheard by chance, maybe she saw something that can help us find out the truth." Lily looked at the two men, feeling that her life was about to change completely. For the first time in her 4 years of existence, someone was paying real attention to what she had to say. "I saw Sebastian leaving the bank on Tuesday morning," she said calmly. "He was carrying a brown folder and talking on his cell phone. He told someone that everything was ready and that no one would suspect a thing." Jack felt the ground crumble beneath his feet. If Lily was telling the truth, it meant Sebastian had lied to him about who had really made the transfer. And if Sebastian had lied about that, what else had he faked? "Where were you exactly when you saw this?" Walter asked, his mind already working to verify the story. "On the sidewalk in front of Mr. Johnson's pharmacy. I was waiting for him to throw out the expired medicine. Because sometimes there are candies in there with it," Lily explained naturally. Walter knew Mr. Johnson's pharmacy well. It was located directly across from the bank. If Lily was really there on Tuesday morning, she would have had a perfect view of who entered and left the branch. "Jack," Walter said slowly. I think we've both been tricked by someone much smarter than we imagined. The revelation about Sebastian hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Jack paced back and forth in the shed, his hands trembling as he processed the possibility of being manipulated by their own company accountant. Walter watched Lily, who remained seated on the floor, her clothes still damp, but her alert eyes following the two men's every move. "This doesn't make sense," Jack muttered, stopping abruptly. "Sebastian has worked with us for 8 years. Why would he do something like this? Money changes people, Jack. You yourself were willing to torture me over $300,000, Walter replied, his voice laced with hurt. "If Sebastian really forged my signature, he must have a very strong reason." Lily stood up slowly, wiping the dirt from her small hands onto her soaked clothes. "Sebastian has a sick daughter," she said, as if commenting on the weather. The two men immediately turned to her. "How do you know that?" Walter asked. "I always sleep near the pharmacy because it's a safe place. Every week he buys very expensive medicine there. The pharmacist always comments to him about how the treatments are getting harder to afford," Lily explained, shrugging. "He always looks very sad when he leaves the pharmacy." Jack sat down heavily on a broken chair, leaning against the wall. "Emily. His daughter has a degenerative disease. The doctors said she would need experimental treatments that cost a fortune." "You knew this and never told me?" Walter asked, surprised. "Sebastian asked me not to mention it. He said he didn't want to mix personal problems with work." Jack ran his hands over his face, visibly shaken. "My God, Walter, what I almost did to you." "It doesn't matter now," Walter said, though his voice still held resentment. "What's important is finding out the truth before it's too late." Lily timidly approached the two men. "Can I ask a question?" "Of course," Walter replied, crouching down again to her level. "Why don't you just go talk to Sebastian? Ask him what really happened." The simplicity of the question made both men feel ashamed. Amidst all the confusion, distrust, and anger, neither of them had considered the most obvious solution, an honest conversation. "She's right," Jack admitted, "but what if he denies everything? What if he's already run off with the money?" "He hasn't run away," Lily stated with conviction. "Yesterday afternoon he was at the pharmacy buying more medicine. He cried in front of the pharmacist because he couldn't afford everything his daughter needed." Walter looked at the extraordinary little girl, impressed not only by her memory, but by her powers of observation and deduction. "Lily, would you like to help us solve this situation?" "Help how?" she asked, her eyes shining with cautious curiosity. "You know this town better than any of us. You know where people go, what they do, when they do it. I need to understand exactly what happened on Tuesday, minute by minute." Lily nodded slowly. "But I'm really hungry. I haven't eaten anything since yesterday." The statement hit Walter like a punch to the gut. Here he was, worried about money and business, while a 4-year-old child was starving right under his nose. "Of course, let's take care of that first." "Hold on," Jack interrupted. "You're going to take her to your house? What if she tells Marlene everything?" Walter hesitated. His wife, Marlene, was known for being a gossip and overly dramatic. If she found out the company was having financial problems, she would probably spread the news to half the town before dinner. "She won't tell," Lily said simply. "I know how to keep secrets. I learned on the streets that sometimes talking too much can be dangerous." "What do you mean?" Walter asked, concerned about what that statement might reveal about the girl's past. "Once I saw a man hitting his wife behind the church. When I told the lady who gave me bread that week, she said I was lying and that kids like me make up stories to get attention." Lily looked down. "The next day, the man came to talk to me. He said if I told any more lies about him, he would hurt me. So I learned to only speak when I'm sure the person will believe me." The silence that followed was heavy with sadness and indignation. Walter felt a growing anger toward a society that allowed such a young child to go through such traumatic experiences. "Hasn't anyone ever tried to help you?" he asked, his voice choked with emotion. "People in town give me food sometimes, but nobody wants a dirty, familyless child in their house," Lily replied with a disturbing naturalness. "I get it. I wouldn't want me either if I were them." "Don't say that," Walter said firmly. "You are smart, brave, and special. Any family would be lucky to have you." Lily looked at him in surprise, as if she had never heard kind words directed at her before. "Are you serious?" "Very serious." Jack watched the interaction between Walter and Lily with conflicting feelings. He had spent the last few weeks obsessed with the idea that his partner had betrayed him, but now he saw a man who was genuinely moved by the suffering of an unknown child. "Walter, we need to be practical," Jack said, though his tone was much softer than before. "If we're going to investigate what really happened, we need a plan, and we need to keep Lily safe." "Safe from what?" Lily asked. "If Sebastian really did something wrong and finds out you can prove it, he might try to stop you from talking," Walter explained carefully. Lily processed the information in silence for a few moments. "So you think he could be dangerous?" "We don't know," Jack admitted. "But desperate people do things they wouldn't normally do." "Like you trying to cook Mr. Walter?" Lily asked, looking directly at Jack. The question completely disarmed Jack, who blushed with shame. I lost control. I thought he had stolen money that I needed for important things." "To help someone you love?" Lily asked, her perception extending beyond her years. "How do you know that?" "Because we only do bad things for two reasons. Because we're bad, or because we're trying to protect someone we love," Lily said, with a wisdom that made the two men look at each other in silence. Walter stood up, making a decision. "Lily, I'm going to make you an offer. How about you come to my house for a few days? You'll have food, a warm place to sleep, and you can help us find out the truth about what happened." "And after that?" she asked, always cautious. "After that, we'll see. Maybe we can find a family who wants to take proper care of you. Or maybe I could stay with you," Lily said hopefully, then quickly looked down. "Sorry, I shouldn't have said that." "Why shouldn't you?" Walter asked gently. "Because whenever I show I want something, it doesn't happen," Lily replied sadly. At that moment, Walter made a decision that would change not only his life, but the fate of everyone involved in this messy story. "Lily, I promise we'll find a solution for all of this, for the company's problems and for your situation." "You really promise?" she asked, daring to look him in the eye. "I promise. But first, let's get something to eat and find out exactly where Sebastian was on Tuesday morning." Jack stood up too, realizing there was no turning back. "All right, Walter, let's solve this together, but we need to be very careful." As the three of them left the abandoned shed toward Walter's car, none of them noticed the figure watching them from a distance, hidden behind the trees surrounding the property. Sebastian Cole had arrived to check if Jack had actually carried out his threat, and now he knew his plans were in imminent danger. The drive to Walter's house was silent, except for the sound of Lily's stomach growling in the back seat of the car. Jack drove, while Walter watched the girl in the rearview mirror, noticing how she examined every detail of the car's interior with fascination. It was likely the first time she had ever been in a car. "Is Marlene home?" Jack asked, breaking the silence as he parked in front of the upper-middle-class residence. "No, she went to Austin to visit her sister. She's not back until Sunday," Walter replied, relieved. He wasn't prepared to explain to his wife why he had brought a street kid home. Walter's house was modest by the standards of a successful businessman, but to Lily it looked like a palace. She stood frozen in the doorway, admiring the clean tiles of the porch and the well-tended plants that decorated the space. "You can come in, Lily," Walter said gently. "This is your home too, at least for now." "Can I really come in? I'm very dirty," she murmured, looking down at her clothes stained with dirt and water. Of course you can. Later we'll get you a bath and find some clean clothes. Jack watched the interaction with mixed feelings. On one hand, he admired Walter's kindness. On the other, he was still struggling with guilt over what he had done at the ranch and with worry about Sebastian. Lily entered the house on tiptoe, as if afraid of dirtying the floor. Her eyes widened as she saw the organized living room, the large television, the well-maintained furniture. For a child who slept outdoors, this was pure luxury. "I'll fix you something to eat," Walter said, heading to the kitchen. "Jack, can you stay with her in the meantime?" Jack nodded but felt uncomfortable. He had no experience with children and was still processing the revelation about Sebastian's possible betrayal. He sat on the sofa and watched Lily, who remained standing in the middle of the room. "You can sit down if you want," he offered. "I won't get the sofa dirty?" she asked, concerned. "A little dirt won't kill anyone." Lily sat on the edge of the sofa, keeping her back straight and her hands on her lap. "Mr. Jack, can I ask you something?" "You can." "Why did you believe Mr. Walter had stolen the money?" The question hit Jack like a stab. "Sebastian showed me proof, documents with Walter's signature authorizing the transfer." "But have you seen Mr. Walter sign papers before?" "Of course, hundreds of times." "And did the signature look the same as the other times?" Jack hesitated. In truth, he had been so shocked by the discovery of the missing money that he hadn't compared the signature to others he knew. He had simply trusted Sebastian's word. I was too upset to pay attention to the details," he admitted. "On the streets, you learn that when someone wants you to believe something very quickly, it's better to think twice," Lily said matter-of-factly. Walter returned from the kitchen carrying a tray with sandwiches, fruit, and a glass of milk. "Here you go. Eat slowly, okay? Your stomach might not be used to a lot of food at once." Lily looked at the food as if it were treasure. She took a small piece of a sandwich and chewed slowly, savoring every crumb. "This is so good. Thank you." "When was the last time you had a full meal?" Walter asked, sitting in the armchair. "I don't remember. Maybe 2 weeks ago. The lady from the bakery gave me an old sweet roll." The answer made the two men look at each other with sadness and indignation. A child shouldn't go 2 weeks without a proper meal. "Lily," Walter said carefully, "do you remember when you arrived in Harmony Creek? How did you end up here?" The girl stopped eating and was quiet for a few moments. "I remember some things. A woman with dark hair brought me in a car. She cried a lot during the drive. She said she'd come back to get me, but she never did." "Do you remember what this woman looked like?" "She was pretty. She smelled like coffee and had a small scar on her forehead, right here." Lily touched her own forehead to demonstrate. "She always sang a song about little birds." Jack leaned forward. "What kind of car did she drive?" "It was dark blue, kind of old. It had a strange noise in the engine, like it was coughing." Walter frowned. The description was too specific for a 4-year-old to invent. "And did she say anything about why she was leaving you here?" "She said I'd be safe in Harmony Creek, that bad people wouldn't find me here." Lily went back to eating, but her expression had turned sad. "She lied. I'm not safe. And she never came back." "Bad people?" Jack repeated. "What bad people?" "I don't know. She never really explained. She just said I couldn't go back home because it was dangerous." Walter felt there was much more to this story than it seemed. A woman doesn't abandon a child in a strange town without a very serious reason. "Do you remember anything else about her? Any detail could be important." Lily closed her eyes, as she did when accessing her organized memories. "She worked at a company that deals with coffee. I remember because her clothes always had a strong smell of roasted coffee, and she was afraid of a man named... Named what?" Walter asked, eager. "Sebastian," Lily completed, opening her eyes. The silence that followed was deafening. Jack turned pale, and Walter felt as if the floor had disappeared from under his feet. "Are you absolutely sure of that name?" Walter asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm sure. She said that name many times during the drive. She said Sebastian would find out where she was and that he couldn't find me." "My God," Jack murmured. "Walter, are you thinking what I'm thinking? If Lily was abandoned here by someone who worked with coffee and was afraid of Sebastian, she could be the daughter of an employee from our company," Jack finished. Lily watched the two men with curiosity, not fully understanding the importance of what she had revealed. "Is this important?" "It could be very important," Walter said. "Lily, do you remember the name of the woman who brought you here?" "Grace, but sometimes she told me to call her Mommy." Walter sat down heavily on the sofa next to Jack. "Grace Moore. She worked with us 2 years ago. She was in charge of the financial archives. And she left the company very strangely," Jack remembered. "One day she just didn't show up anymore, sent a resignation letter in the mail. The same week we discovered some irregularities in the archives," Walter added. "Irregularities that Sebastian said they were going to investigate, but were never mentioned again." The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together in a disturbing way. Grace had fled the town with Lily, afraid of Sebastian. She had left the girl in Harmony Creek, promising to return, but never did. And now, Sebastian was involved in the disappearance of $300,000. "Jack," Walter said slowly, "I think Sebastian has been plotting something for much longer than we imagined. And if Grace discovered something and had to flee to protect her daughter, then Lily could be the key to solving not only the current theft, but to finding out what really happened 2 years ago." Lily had finished eating and was watching the two men attentively. "Do you think Grace is my real mom?" "It's possible," Walter answered gently, "but first we need to be sure, and we need to keep you safe while we investigate all of this. What if Sebastian finds out I'm here?" The question made the two men look at each other with concern. If Sebastian was really dangerous enough to make Grace flee town, what would he do if he discovered her daughter had returned? "We won't let anything happen to you," Walter promised, "but maybe it's best if you stay away from the windows for now." Outside the house, hidden behind a tree on the corner, Sebastian Cole watched the movement through the living room windows. He had followed Jack's car from the ranch and now knew exactly where they were. When he saw the small silhouette of a child moving inside the house, his blood ran cold. It couldn't be who he thought it was. Grace had promised she would never return to Harmony Creek, but if it really was Lily, all of his carefully laid plans were in mortal danger. Sebastian Cole remained hidden behind the tree for a few more minutes, watching Walter's house with a racing heart. His hands trembled as he held his cell phone, debating internally whether to call someone or simply flee town that very night. After so long thinking his secret was safe, seeing that small silhouette in the window brought back all the fears he had tried to bury. He decided to leave discreetly and return home, where he needed to think about his next move. As he drove through the familiar streets of Harmony Creek, his mind went back 2 years, to when everything had started to fall apart. Inside Walter's house, Lily had finished eating and was now looking around the room with renewed curiosity. After the revelation about Grace, every detail seemed important to her. "Mr. Walter, can I see pictures of the people who worked at your company?" she asked suddenly. "Why?" Jack inquired, curious about the girl's reasoning. "Because if I see a picture of Grace, I'll know if she's really the woman who brought me here, and maybe I'll recognize other people she was afraid of." Walter stood up and went to a cabinet where he kept company photo albums. He returned with a binder full of photographs from corporate events and employee meetings. "Here are pictures from the last 5 years," he said, opening the binder on the coffee table. "Let's see if you recognize anyone." Lily approached and began to examine the photographs with the same attention she dedicated to everything she observed. Her small hands gently touched the edges of the photos as her eyes scanned each face. On the third photograph she stopped. "That's her! That's Grace!" she exclaimed, pointing to a brunette woman of about 35 who was smiling shyly next to other employees. Walter and Jack leaned in to see the photo. It was indeed Grace Moore at a company holiday party 2.5 years ago. "Are you absolutely sure?" Walter asked. "Totally. She's wearing the same necklace she wore the day she brought me here." Lily pointed to a small pendant on Grace's neck. "And look at the scar on her forehead." Indeed, in the photograph, a small mark was visible on Grace's forehead, exactly as Lily had described. "My God, so it's true," Jack murmured. Grace fled town with her daughter. Lily continued to examine the photos and stopped at another one, where Sebastian appeared next to Grace during a get-together. "Is that the Sebastian you were talking about?" "That's him," Walter confirmed, noticing how in the photograph Sebastian was clearly too close to Grace, with his hand on her shoulder in a way that seemed possessive. "Grace didn't like him," Lily said, still looking at the photo. "She always got nervous when she said his name. And once I heard her crying on the phone, telling someone that he wouldn't leave her alone." The two men looked at each other, realizing that the situation was much more complex and dark than they had imagined. Sebastian wasn't just a desperate accountant trying to steal money to pay for his daughter's treatment. He had a history of problematic behavior. "Lily, do you remember anything else Grace said about Sebastian?" Walter asked, sitting next to her. The girl closed her eyes, accessing her organized memories. She said he found out where she lived and started showing up there at night. That he said he knew things about her that could get her into trouble. "Blackmail," Jack said through gritted teeth. The bastard was blackmailing her. "But blackmail about what?" Walter asked. "Grace handled important papers for the company. She always said that," Lily continued. "And she said Sebastian wanted her to change some things in the papers, but she didn't want to, because it was wrong." "Forgery of documents," Walter concluded. Sebastian wanted her to forge financial records, and she refused. "Until he found a way to force her," Jack added, the picture becoming clearer. "He probably threatened to harm Lily if she didn't cooperate." The girl nodded sadly. "In the last week before we came here, Grace got very strange. She cried a lot and always looked out the window as if she were expecting something bad to happen." Walter felt a growing anger towards Sebastian, but also a deep guilt for not having noticed that an employee was being threatened right under his nose. So Grace must have forged documents under duress, discovered Sebastian was planning something bigger, and fled to protect Lily, he summarized. "But why didn't she come back for her daughter?" "Maybe she couldn't," Lily said simply. "Maybe Sebastian did something to her." The silence that followed was heavy and agonizing. The possibility that something terrible had happened to Grace hung in the air like a dark cloud. "We need to find Grace," Walter said, determined. "And we need to do it before Sebastian finds out Lily is here." "How are we going to do that?" Jack asked. "We don't even know where she is." "I know where she would go when she was scared," Lily said suddenly. "She always said that if she ever needed to run away for real, she would go to her sister's house in Tyler." "Grace has a sister in Tyler?" Walter asked, surprised not to know this detail about his former employee's life. "She does. Her name is Marcia, and she works at a school. Grace always said that Marcia was the only person she completely trusted." Jack stood up and began to pace the room. "So we have a plan. We go to Tyler and look for Grace. If she's alive and knows what Sebastian did, she can help us prove the truth about the money." "And take Lily with us?" Walter asked. "It could be dangerous." "It's more dangerous to leave her here alone if Sebastian finds out where she is," Jack retorted. Besides, Grace might not trust us if she doesn't see that Lily is okay. Lily looked at the two men with a mixture of hope and fear. The possibility of seeing Grace again made her happy, but she was also scared of what they might discover. Mr. Walter, if we find Grace, will she want me to go away with her? The question deeply touched Walter, who had already developed a genuine affection for the girl. If she is really your mother, Lily, she has the right to be with you, but we will make sure you are safe and happy, no matter what happens. Ladu, what if she doesn't want to take care of me anymore? What if she left me here because she doesn't love me anymore? Don't say that, Walter said firmly, kneeling in front of her. Grace brought you here to protect you. That's love, not abandonment. Mothers make sacrifices for their children even when it hurts a lot. At that moment, Walter's phone rang. The name Sebastian Cole appeared on the screen, making the three of them look at each other with apprehension. Answer it, Jack whispered, but don't let on that we know anything. Walter answered, trying to keep his voice natural. Hello, Sebastian. Walter, we need to talk urgently. Jack was looking for me today, and I'm concerned about some accusations he made. What kind of accusations? I'd rather not discuss it over the phone. Can we meet at the office tomorrow morning, say 7 o'clock? Walter looked at Jack, who nodded. Of course, Sebastian, we'll be there. We? Jack and I. We need to resolve this situation like civilized adults. Perfect. Until tomorrow, Walter. And be careful who you trust. They're not always who they seem to be. The call ended, leaving a tense silence in the room. He knows, Jack said. He knows we've discovered something. And the way he talked about trust. It was a veiled threat, Walter agreed. Lily approached the two men. You won't let him take me, will you? Never, Walter promised, but we need to be very smart from now on. Sebastian is more dangerous than we thought. As the three planned their next steps, none of them realized that Sebastian hadn't called from home, but from his car parked on the next street over. He had returned to confirm his suspicions and now knew for certain that Lily was at Walter's house. The game had completely changed, and Sebastian needed to accelerate his plans before he lost control of the situation he had carefully manipulated for 2 years. The night passed slowly at Walter's house. Lily had taken a warm bath and put on a large borrowed t-shirt, which served as a makeshift nightgown. It was the first time in years she had slept in a real bed, but sleep didn't come easily. The day's events swirled in her mind like a whirlwind of confused emotions. Walter had prepared the guest room for her, but after 2 hours of hearing small noises coming from the room, he knocked gently on the door. Lily, is everything okay? Can I ask a question? Came the shy reply. Of course, may I come in? The girl was sitting on the edge of the bed, her small feet dangling in the air. Mr. Walter, why are you being so nice to me? The question caught Walter off guard. He sat in the chair near the bed, thinking carefully about his answer. Because you deserve kindness, Lily. Every child does. And because, well, I think you appeared in my life at the right time. What do you mean? Marlene and I were never able to have children. We always wanted to, but it just didn't happen. Seeing you alone, needing help, it feels like a sign. Lily processed this information in silence. You wanted to have a daughter like me. We wanted to have a daughter exactly like you, Walter corrected, surprising himself with his own answer. But first, we need to solve all this mess and find Grace. And what if she wants me to go back to her? Then we'll respect that, but we'll also make sure you'll be safe and happy. Lily lay down in bed, pulling the blanket up to her chin. Mr. Walter, I'm scared of what might happen tomorrow. Me too, he admitted. But sometimes the only way to stop being afraid is to face what scares us. In the living room, Jack had spent the night on the sofa but couldn't sleep either. His mind was tormented by guilt for what he had almost done to Walter, and by a growing anger towards Sebastian. How had he been so blind as to not see the kind of man he was working with? At 5 in the morning, the three were awake, having breakfast in silence. Lily ate slowly, savoring each bite as if it were the last meal of her life. "Remember," Jack said, "when we meet Sebastian, we can't let on that we know about Grace and Lily. We need him to incriminate himself. And what if he tries to do something to us?" Walter asked. "That's why we're meeting at the office, where there are other people around. He won't risk doing anything in public." At 6:30, the two men were getting ready to leave when Lily approached them. "Can I come with you?" "No, it's too dangerous," Walter said immediately, "but I can help. If he tells a lie, I'll know because I remember everything Grace told me." Jack considered the proposal. "She's right, Walter. Her memory could be our best weapon against Sebastian's lies." "Absolutely not. I'm not putting a child at risk." "Mr. Walter," Lily said seriously, "I'm already at risk. If Sebastian is really dangerous, he already knows where I am. At least if I go with you, I can help find out the truth." After a few more minutes of discussion, Walter relented, but with strict conditions. Lily would stay in the car, hidden, and would only speak up if it was absolutely necessary. The Walter and Barnes Company was in a modest office building in downtown Harmony Creek. When they arrived at 7 o'clock sharp, Sebastian was already waiting for them at the door, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Punctual as always," he said, opening the door. "Shall we go to the conference room?" Sebastian Cole, 50, had the appearance of a typical accountant, short, thin, with glasses and a slightly stooped posture from spending hours hunched over papers. But that morning, there was something different in his eyes, a tension he couldn't completely hide. "Sebastian," Walter began, "Jack told me about your discovery, about the money transferred in my name." "Yes, it was very painful for me to find that out, Walter. We've worked together for so many years." "Can I see the documents?" Jack interrupted. Sebastian hesitated for a moment. "Of course, I have everything here." He grabbed a folder from his desk and opened it, showing bank statements and transfer receipts. Jack examined the papers carefully this time, paying attention to the details he had ignored the first time. Walter's signature looked correct at first glance, but there were small differences in the stroke that a trained eye could detect. "Sebastian, can you show me other documents with Walter's signature for comparison?" "Why? Are you doubting their authenticity?" "I just want to be sure we're dealing with all the facts." Sebastian went to the file cabinet and returned with some contracts signed by Walter in recent months. When Jack placed the signatures side by side, the differences became evident. "Look here," Jack said, pointing to specific details. "The way the W is drawn is completely different, and the connection between the letters doesn't match." Sebastian paled slightly. Maybe Walter signed in a hurry, or he was nervous. "Or maybe someone forged my signature," Walter said firmly. "That's a very serious accusation," Sebastian replied, but his voice trembled. "Are you suggesting that I forged documents?" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm asking you directly. Did you forge my signature to transfer the company's money?" Sebastian stood up abruptly, walking to the window. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. My daughter, Emily. She's dying, Walter. The doctors said that without the experimental treatments, she has 6 months to live at most." "Oh, and that justifies stealing from the company?" Jack asked. "I was going to pay it all back. As soon as I could get the money from somewhere else, I was going to replace every penny." The confession came out like an explosion, leaving the three men in silence for a few moments. "Sebastian," Walter said in a softer voice, "why didn't you talk to us? We could have found a solution together." Because you would never understand," Sebastian replied, tears starting to stream down his face. You have money. You have security. You don't know what it's like to watch your daughter waste away in front of you and not be able to do anything. But that doesn't explain Grace, Jack said calmly. Why did you force her to forge documents? Why did she have to flee town? Sebastian's face transformed completely, his vulnerability replaced by something darker and more dangerous. How do you know about Grace? Because we found her daughter, Walter said, deciding it was time to put his cards on the table. Sebastian froze. That's impossible. Grace took the girl far away, very far away. She left Lily in Harmony Creek and disappeared. The child spent 2 years on the streets before she found us. Where is she now? Sebastian asked, his voice taking on a threatening tone. Safe, Jack replied. Away from you. Sebastian began to laugh, a bitter and desperate sound. You have no idea what you're messing with. Grace wasn't the saint you think she was. She discovered my scheme, yes, but she also discovered other things. Things that could destroy much more than our little company. What things? Walter asked. Grace was very curious, always poking around in files that were none of her business. And one day she found documents that proved our company was being used to launder money for other organizations. Jack felt his blood run cold. What organizations? People who don't take it well when their secrets are discovered, Sebastian said with a sinister smile. Grace threatened me. She said she was going to expose everything, so I did what I had to do to protect my family. What did you do to her? Walter asked, fearing the answer. I didn't do anything directly. I just shared some information with the right people about where she was, what she knew. The silence that followed was interrupted by the sound of Jack's cell phone ringing. It was a text message from an unknown number. If you want to see Grace alive, bring the girl to the old textile mill in 1 hour. Come alone. Sebastian smiled as he saw the panic on the two men's faces. It seems our conversations have attracted attention. Now you'll have to choose Lily's safety or Grace's life. Outside the building, hidden in the back seat of the car, Lily had heard everything through the cell phone Walter had intentionally left on. Her small hands trembled as she realized her presence had put Grace in mortal danger. Without anyone noticing, she quietly got out of the car and started walking toward the old textile mill, determined to save the woman who had sacrificed everything to protect her. When Walter and Jack ran down to the parking lot, they found the car empty. Panic seized both men as they realized Lily had disappeared. She heard everything, Walter said, desperate. The phone was on and she heard our whole conversation. A 4-year-old girl can't have gone far, Jack tried to reassure him. But his voice betrayed his nervousness. Let's check the nearby streets. Sebastian came down right behind them, watching the two men's desperation with ill-disguised satisfaction. Looks like you've lost something important, he commented cynically. Sebastian, this has gone too far, Walter said, turning to face him. An innocent child has nothing to do with adult problems. Innocent? Sebastian laughed bitterly. That child is the only witness who can definitively incriminate me. And now she's walking right into a trap that could cost both their lives. Jack stepped toward Sebastian, his fists clenched. Who are these people you're involved with? Why do they want to harm a child? People who invested a lot of money in our company expecting clean returns for funds that, let's say, needed a new origin, Sebastian explained. When Grace discovered the suspicious transactions, she became a threat to operations much larger than our small business. Money laundering, Walter murmured, realizing the true extent of the problem. Our company was being used for money laundering schemes, and very well, I might add, until Grace started asking inconvenient questions. While the three men argued in the parking lot, Lily walked determinedly through the streets of Harmony Creek toward the town's industrial zone. Her small feet ached against the asphalt, But the urgency to save Grace was stronger than any physical discomfort. The old textile mill had closed 5 years ago when the company moved its operations to a larger city. The abandoned building stood isolated on the outskirts, surrounded by vacant lots and overgrown vegetation. Lily knew this place well. During her 2 years on the streets, she had taken refuge there a few times during heavy storms. She knew there were several entrances, including a hole in the back fence where a child could easily pass through. When she arrived, she hid behind a rusty dumpster to watch the activity. There were 2 cars parked in front of the building, and she could see men talking near the main entrance. Silently, Lily crept along the side of the property until she found the hole in the fence. She slipped through and headed to the back of the building, where she knew there was a broken window on the ground floor she used to enter. The inside of the mill was dark and smelled of mildew. Old machines covered in dust filled the space, creating a labyrinth of shadows. Lily moved carefully, using her memory to navigate the familiar environment. Voices came from the second floor. She found a service staircase and began to climb, stopping on each step to listen. The voices grew clearer as she got closer. "Said they'd come alone, but I don't see anyone coming," a rough male voice said. "They'll come," another voice replied. "Sebastian guaranteed they'd do anything to save the girl." "And the woman? What do we do with her afterward?" "Sebastian said she knows too much. She can't leave here alive." Lily's heart raced. Grace was really here, and she was in mortal danger. She continued climbing until she reached the second floor, where she hid behind an industrial sewing machine to observe the situation. In the center of the hall, tied to a chair, was Grace. Even after 2 years, Lily recognized her immediately. She was thinner, with her hair cut very short, but she was definitely the woman who had sung lullabies to her. 2 men stood guard near the window, watching the street. They were the kind of men Lily had learned to avoid during her days on the streets, men with cold eyes and clothes that tried to look respectable but couldn't hide the violence they carried. "Grace," one of the men whispered, approaching the chair. "Your friends are late. I wonder if they've changed their minds about saving you." Grace lifted her head with difficulty. "They won't bring Lily to you. They're not crazy. We hope you're wrong, because if they don't bring the girl, you're going to find out why we shouldn't have trusted Sebastian when he said you were dead." From her hiding place, Lily watched Grace with a mixture of love and pain. The woman who had sacrificed everything to protect her was now paying the price for that protection. She couldn't let that happen. Her childish but sharp mind, honed by street experience, began to form a plan. She remembered that on the first floor, there was a fire alarm system that still worked, even with the factory abandoned. If she could activate it, she would create enough confusion to help Grace. Carefully, Lily went back down the stairs and looked for the alarm box. When she found it, she broke the glass with a small rock and pulled the lever. The deafening sound of the alarm echoed throughout the building, causing the 2 men on the second floor to panic. "What the hell was that?" one of them yelled. "Must be a glitch in the system. Go check it out." One of the men ran downstairs, leaving only one guarding Grace. It was the chance Lily had been waiting for. While the remaining man looked nervously out the window, Lily quietly climbed the stairs again. Grace saw her approaching, and her eyes widened in surprise and terror. "Lily!" she whispered, barely able to believe what she was seeing. The girl put a finger to her lips, signaling for silence, and approached from behind the chair. Her small hands began to work on the knots of the ropes binding Grace, but they were too tight for her to undo. At that moment, the man who had gone downstairs came running back. "It's not a glitch! Someone activated the alarm on purpose!" he yelled as he entered the hall. It was then that he saw Lily behind Grace's chair. "The girl! She's here!" The alarm continued to blare, creating a cacophony that made communication difficult. The 2 men approached Lily, who cowered against Grace. "How did you get here, you little pest?" one of them asked, crouching in front of her. "I came to save Grace," Lily said with a courage that surprised even herself. "You came to turn yourself in, that's what. Now we'll just wait for your friends to come and get you both." Grace managed to turn her head to look Lily in the eye. "My darling, you shouldn't have come. You were supposed to stay safe." "I couldn't let them hurt you," Lily replied, her small hands trying to reach for Grace's. "How touching," one of the men said sarcastically. "A family reunion in just the right place." At that moment, the sound of approaching cars caught everyone's attention. Through the window, they could see Walter and Jack getting out of a vehicle, clearly tense and worried. "Finally," said the first man. "Now let's end this situation once and for all." Grace looked at Lily with tears in her eyes, realizing that her attempt to protect the girl had completely failed. They were both now trapped in the web of corruption and violence that Sebastian had woven around them. "Lily," she whispered, "no matter what happens, I want you to know that I love you very much. You are the most important thing in my life." "I love you too," Lily replied, finally understanding that Grace was truly her mother, not just someone who had cared for her out of obligation. Outside, Walter and Jack approached the main entrance, unaware that inside the building, 2 precious lives depended on the decisions they would make in the next few minutes. Walter and Jack stopped at the entrance of the abandoned factory, hesitating before entering. The fire alarm was still blaring intermittently, creating an atmosphere of urgency and chaos. "Something's wrong," Jack said, looking at the dark windows of the building. "Why is the alarm going off?" "Lily," Walter murmured with certainty. "She must have found a way inside before us." Sebastian had insisted on accompanying them, claiming his presence was necessary to negotiate with the kidnappers. Now he walked behind the two, a discreet smile on his face as he realized his plan was working perfectly. "Let's go," Sebastian said, pushing them toward the door. "The more time we waste, the more dangerous it gets for everyone involved." As they entered the building, the sound of the alarm became deafening. A man was waiting for them on the ground floor, gesturing for them to go up the stairs. "Second floor," he shouted over the noise, "and no sudden moves." As they climbed the creaky stairs, Walter felt his heart pounding. His mind was focused on one thing, ensuring Lily got out of there alive and safe. Any other outcome was unacceptable. On the second floor, the scene they found confirmed their worst fears. Lily was crouched next to a chair where a woman was tied up, obviously Grace. A tall, thin man was pointing a gun in their direction. "Finally," said the armed man. "We were starting to think you wouldn't come." Walter looked directly at Lily, who stared back at him with eyes full of tears, but also determination. The girl had grown up so much in just 2 days, forced by circumstances to face situations no child should ever experience. "Lily, are you okay?" he asked, taking a step forward. "Stop right there," the armed man ordered. "Nobody moves without my permission." "Mr. Walter," Lily said in a trembling voice, "this is Grace. She's my real mom." Grace looked at Walter with a mixture of gratitude and desperation. "Thank you for taking care of her," she said in a hoarse voice. "I never thought I'd see her again." "What a touching reunion," the armed man interrupted sarcastically. "But let's get down to business. Sebastian told me you have valuable information about the company's operations." Jack stepped forward. "What operations? All we know is that Sebastian stole money to pay for his daughter's treatment." "Sebastian stole a lot more than $300,000, said a new voice from the stairs. Marlene Sullivan, Walter's wife, appeared at the top of the steps, accompanied by another armed man. "Marlene?" Walter exclaimed, shocked. "What are you doing here? Weren't you supposed to be in Austin?" Marlene smiled coldly, an expression Walter had never seen on the face of the woman he had been married to for 15 years. "I never went to Austin, dear. I was busy taking care of the family business." "What business?" "The business you were too innocent to realize existed," she replied, approaching the group. "While you were worried about coffee and legitimate contracts, I found much more profitable ways to use our company. Grace lifted her head with difficulty. Marlene was the real head of the money laundering operations, she said. Sebastian was just her puppet. Very clever, Grace, Marlene said. Too bad your cleverness is going to cost you your life. Lily pressed herself against Grace, finally understanding that the situation was far more complex and dangerous than she had imagined. Grace, I'm so sorry I came here. Now you're in danger because of me. No, my darling, Grace answered softly. You came here out of love. There's nothing wrong with that. Walter stared at Marlene as if she were a stranger. How could you do this? Corrupt our company, involve innocent people. Innocent people, Marlene laughed. Grace discovered our scheme and threatened to expose us. Sebastian had to take measures to protect our investors. What measures? Jack asked, fearing the answer. Grace had two choices, cooperate with us or disappear permanently, Sebastian explained, finally showing his true colors. She chose a third option, to run away with her daughter. That complicated things. So you brought her back by force, Walter concluded. It wasn't hard to track her, Marlene said. A single woman with a small child doesn't go unnoticed, especially when she's hiding in Tyler at her sister's house. Grace closed her eyes, realizing she'd put Marcia in danger too. What did you do to my sister? Nothing yet, Marlene replied. But that could change if you don't cooperate now. Lily looked around the group of adults, her mind trying to process all the information. Then something clicked in her extraordinary memory. I remember you, she said, looking directly at Marlene. You used to come to our house sometimes. Grace always got nervous when you showed up. Marlene seemed genuinely surprised. You remember that? You were so little. I remember everything. And I remember one time you told Grace that if she didn't do what you wanted, something bad would happen to me. The silence that followed was tense. Walter looked at Marlene with growing horror. Realizing his wife had threatened an innocent child. Marlene, how could you? That's how we got her to forge the first documents, Sebastian explained. We threatened the girl's safety. Grace would do anything to protect her daughter. Until she found out we were planning to use Lily as permanent collateral, Marlene continued. That's when she decided to run. Grace opened her eyes, looking directly at Walter. They wanted me to bring Lily to work as a courier between the laundering points. A small child would raise less suspicion. Using a 4-year-old child for crimes? Jack exclaimed, horrified. Times are tough, Marlene said without a trace of remorse. We had to be creative. Walter felt an anger he had never experienced before. The woman with whom he had shared his life for years was capable of using an innocent child for criminal purposes. Marlene, this ends now, he said firmly. Lily and Grace are leaving here with us. No, dear, Marlene replied with false sweetness. You're leaving here alone, and you'll continue to run the company as if nothing happened. Grace and the girl will stay with us as collateral to ensure you keep your mouth shut. Never. Oh, you will, she said, signaling to the armed men. Because if you don't cooperate, it's not just their lives at stake. Remember what happened to your employee Maria, who asked too many questions about the company's finances. Walter turned pale. Maria had left the company 6 months ago, citing health problems. He had never heard from her again. What did you do to Maria? Let's just say she found a permanent solution to her health problems, Sebastian said with a cruel smile. At that moment, Lily stood up, her small hands trembling but her voice surprisingly firm. You are very bad people, she said, looking directly at Marlene, but I know something you don't know. What would that be, you little pest? Marlene asked with disdain. I know where the papers are that Grace hid, the papers that prove everything you've done. The alarm finally stopped ringing, making the silence that followed even more dramatic. All eyes turned to Lily, who remained standing beside Grace with a determination that impressed everyone present. "What papers?" Sebastian asked, his voice betraying his nervousness. "The papers she saved before she ran away with me. I saw where she hid them, and I can take you there. But only if you let Grace go." Grace looked at Lily with a mixture of pride and terror, realizing her 4-year-old daughter was trying to negotiate with criminals to save her. Lily's offer created a tense silence in the room. Marlene and Sebastian looked at each other, clearly calculating the implications of the girl's proposal. Grace tried to protest, but Lily interrupted her with a determined look. "Lily, no," Grace whispered. "You don't understand who you're dealing with." "I understand more than you think," the girl replied, keeping her eyes fixed on Marlene. "On the streets, I learned that bad people always want something, and right now you want the papers that Grace hid." Marlene approached, crouching down to Lily's level. "How clever you are." "Very well, let's make a deal. You take us to the documents, and we'll let your mother go." "And Mr. Walter and Mr. Jack too," Lily added firmly. "No," Marlene said coldly. "They know too much now. Either they stay and cooperate, or—" "Then there's no deal," Lily interrupted, crossing her small arms. "Either we all leave here, or I'll never tell you where the papers are." Sebastian stepped forward, visibly irritated. "This little pest is in no position to make demands." "Yes, I am," Lily said calmly, "because without the papers, you'll never know what other people Grace told about the bad things you do." Marlene frowned. "What other people?" "Grace made copies of the papers and sent them to people who live far away. If anything happens to us, those people will show the papers to the police." Grace looked at Lily in astonishment. The girl was inventing an elaborate story, using her intelligence to create a situation of mutual protection. But what was most impressive was that she was doing it so convincingly that even Grace almost believed it. "You're lying," Sebastian said, but his voice betrayed his uncertainty. "Am I?" Lily asked, tilting her head to the side. "Do you want to take that risk? Because if I'm telling the truth and something happens to us, those other people will know you were responsible." Walter watched Lily with growing admiration. In just 4 years of life, the girl had developed a capacity for negotiation and psychological manipulation that surprised even experienced adults. "Marlene," he said, "let the girls go. You can get what you want through me. You don't need to involve innocent children in this." "No one here is innocent," Marlene retorted. "Grace stole from us. You were negligent in supervising the company, and this girl, well, she knows too much." "I have a better proposal," Jack said suddenly. "What if I take all the blame for the diverted money? I can confess that I was the one who stole the $300,000. That would solve your legal problem." Sebastian laughed bitterly. "You think this is just about $300,000? Jack, you have no idea the scale of what we're dealing with here." "How much money passed through the company?" Walter asked. "Over the last 2 years, approximately 15 million, Marlene answered with ill-disguised pride. "Money that came from various sources and came out clean through our coffee contracts." The number left Walter stunned. His company had become a channel for a massive money laundering operation, and he hadn't noticed a thing. "How did you manage to do this without me knowing?" he asked. "You were always so trusting, dear," Marlene said. "You never questioned it when I said I had secured new lucrative contracts. You never checked the details of the clients I brought in. Your innocence was our greatest advantage." "And now," Grace asked, "what do you intend to do with us?" Marlene stood up, walking to the window to look at the street below. "Now you're going to help us recover the documents you hid. After that, well, we'll see how you behave." "No," Lily said firmly. "First you release Grace, then I'll take you to the papers, and then we all leave together." "You're in no position to make demands, girl," said one of the armed men. Yes, I am, Lily replied, surprising everyone with her courage, because if you hurt me, I'll faint. Faint, Marlene repeated, confused. Grace immediately understood what Lily was doing. The girl had previously mentioned that she fainted under extreme stress, a rare medical condition she had developed as a defense mechanism during her years on the streets. I have a condition, Lily explained. When I get really scared or someone hurts me, I faint and don't wake up for a long time, and when that happens, I forget some things, like where the papers are hidden. It was a brilliant lie, mixed with a partial truth. Lily did indeed faint under extreme stress, but she didn't forget things. Her memory remained intact even during the episodes, but Marlene and Sebastian didn't know that. How convenient, Sebastian said sarcastically, but Grace could see he was seriously considering the possibility. Do you want to test it? Lily asked, looking directly at him. You can scare me really hard and see what happens, but then you'll never find out where the papers are that could put you in jail. Marlene returned from the window, clearly frustrated with the situation. All right. How about a compromise? We release Grace, you take us to the documents, and then we negotiate about the rest. And Mr. Walter and Mr. Jack, Lily insisted. They stay here as a guarantee that you'll come back. Lily looked at Walter, who nodded almost imperceptibly. He was telling her to accept the proposal, that he would find a way to resolve the situation later. Okay, Lily finally agreed. But if anything happens to them while I'm gone, you'll never see me again. Sebastian walked over to Grace and began to untie the ropes binding her to the chair. You have a very smart daughter, he commented, perhaps too smart for her own good. She's a survivor, Grace replied, rubbing her wrists, bruised by the ropes. She learned to defend herself because the adults failed to protect her. When Grace stood up, Lily ran to hug her. It was the first real hug they had shared in 2 years, and both tried to memorize every second of that moment. My darling, Grace whispered in Lily's ear, be very careful. These people are more dangerous than you can imagine. I know, Lily replied softly, but I have a plan. What plan? Trust me. Marlene clapped her hands impatiently. What a touching reunion. Now let's get going. The more time we waste, the more nervous our investors get. Lily pulled away from Grace and looked one last time at Walter and Jack. I'll be back for you, she said with a conviction that made both men believe she really had a plan. Be careful, Lily, Walter said. Remember that you're the most important thing in this whole story. No, I'm not, she replied with a sad smile. The most important thing is that good people are protected from bad people. As Lily, Grace, and Marlene headed for the stairs, followed by one of the armed men, Sebastian stayed with Walter and Jack. The accountant watched the two men with a cruel smile. We hope your little protégé is smarter than you are, he said, because if she tries anything clever, you too will pay the price. Outside the factory, as they walked toward the car, Grace whispered to Lily, My darling, what's your plan? And please tell me it's not dangerous. It's a little dangerous, Lily admitted, but I think it will work. I just need you to do exactly what I say when we get there. Where are we going? To a place I know well, Lily said, glancing discreetly at Marlene, who was walking ahead of them. A place where I learned that sometimes the only way to beat bad people is by being smarter than them. The car drove through the streets of Harmony Creek with Marlene driving, the armed man in the passenger seat, and Grace and Lily in the back. The atmosphere was tense, but Lily maintained an apparent calm that intrigued Grace. Where are we going? Marlene asked, looking at Lily in the rearview mirror. To the church in the center of town, Lily replied. The papers are hidden there, in the church. Why would Grace hide important documents in a church? Lily looked at Grace, who understood she was to follow her daughter's story. Because it's a place bad people don't usually look, Grace said, and because Father Anthony is a trustworthy person. Marlene frowned. Does the priest know about the documents? No, Lily replied quickly. Grace hid them without him knowing, in a place only I saw her put them. When they arrived at the church, Lily discreetly observed the surroundings. It was mid-afternoon on a Tuesday, and a few elderly people were leaving the afternoon mass, perfect for what she had in mind. Where exactly are the papers? The armed man asked, clearly uncomfortable being near a religious site with a gun. Inside the church, under one of the pews, Lily said, getting out of the car. But we have to be very quiet, because if the priest notices, he'll call people to help. Marlene hesitated. What people? The people from the community. When there's a problem at the church, they always show up to help, Grace explained, understanding where Lily was leading the situation. It's better if Lily and I go get the documents alone. No way, Marlene said. We're all going together. Then you'll have to hide the gun, Lily said, pointing at the man, because if people see him with that in the church, they'll get very scared and call for help. The man looked at Marlene, who reluctantly nodded. He tucked the gun inside his jacket, but kept his hand close to it. When they entered the church, the atmosphere was silent, with only a few lit candles and the soft smell of incense in the air. There were 3 elderly ladies praying in the front pews, and Father Anthony was organizing some books near the altar. Where are the papers? Marlene whispered impatiently. Lily pointed to the pews in the middle of the church. There, under the 5th pew, Grace made a small hole and put an envelope in there. As they approached the indicated spot, Lily bent down and began to feel under the pew, as if looking for something. In reality, she was buying time for her strategy to work. I can't find it, she said, feigning nervousness. Maybe it's the next pew over. What's taking so long? The armed man muttered, looking nervously at the ladies praying in front. At that moment, Father Anthony approached the group. Can I help you with anything? No, thank you, Father, Marlene said quickly. We're just praying. Father Anthony, Lily exclaimed suddenly, running toward the priest. Do you remember me? The priest, a kind man of about 60, looked at the girl in surprise. Of course I remember you, Lily. You always came here when you were hungry. How are you doing? I'm okay now, Father. These people are helping me, Lily said, pointing to Marlene and the armed man. Then she lowered her voice as if to tell a secret. Father, can you do me a favor? Of course, my child. Can you give these people a special blessing? They're going through a very difficult time and need divine protection. Grace watched Lily with growing admiration. The girl was using the priest's natural kindness to create an awkward situation for Marlene and her accomplice. It would be an honor, the priest said, turning to Marlene with a warm smile. Let's gather here at the front for a special prayer. No, thank you, Marlene said hastily. We're in a hurry. But the father said he was going to give a special blessing, Lily insisted, her voice echoing through the church. Don't you want divine protection? The 3 ladies praying at the front turned around, curious about what was happening. The priest also seemed surprised by Marlene's refusal. My child, he said gently, a blessing only takes a few minutes, and from the looks on your faces, it seems you could really use some spiritual peace. The armed man was visibly uncomfortable, sweating inside the jacket that hid his gun. Marlene realized she was being manipulated by Lily, but didn't know how to get out of the situation without looking even more suspicious. All right, she reluctantly agreed, but make it quick. As the priest began to gather the group for the blessing, Lily whispered to Grace, when I say amen really loud, you run to the door and scream for help. I'll hide behind the altar. And you, how will you escape? I know a door at the back of the church that leads to the priest's yard. I can get out that way. Father Anthony began the prayer, asking for divine protection and guidance for all present. Marlene and the armed man participated reluctantly, while the elderly ladies joined the group, happy to take part in a special blessing. "May God protect these troubled souls," the priest prayed, "and may they find the path of truth and justice." Lily noted the irony of the priest's words, considering he was praying for criminals. As the prayer was coming to an end, she prepared to execute her plan. "Amen!" Lily said very loudly, her voice echoing through the church. Immediately, Grace ran toward the main door, screaming, "Help! Please, someone call the police! These people are threatening us!" The armed man tried to run after her, but Lily deliberately tripped him, causing him to fall and hit one of the pews. The gun slipped from inside his jacket and clattered onto the floor with a metallic sound that echoed through the church. The three ladies started screaming. The priest was shocked to see the gun, and Marlene realized her plan had completely fallen apart. "Lily!" Marlene yelled, trying to grab the girl, but she was already running toward the altar. "Father, this woman and this man are very bad people," Lily shouted as she ran. "They've hurt a lot of people and are trying to harm us." Father Anthony, despite his initial shock, reacted quickly. He positioned himself between Marlene and Lily, shielding the girl with his own body. "My daughter," he said firmly to Marlene, "I think you had better explain what is happening here." Outside, Grace continued to scream for help. Several people were approaching the church, including some men who worked at the nearby auto repair shop. The armed man tried to pick up the gun from the floor, but one of the elderly ladies, showing surprising courage, stomped on his hand with force. "You will not touch that devilish thing in the house of God," she said with authority. "Mrs. Rose, call the police," the priest requested, keeping Lily protected behind him. Marlene realized she was completely cornered. The situation had spiraled completely out of her control because of the intelligence and courage of a 4-year-old girl. "Lily," she said desperately, "the documents. Where are the documents, really?" "There are no hidden documents here," Lily replied calmly. "I made up that story to get Grace away from those bad men." You lied about everything." "I learned on the streets that sometimes lying is the only way to protect the ones you love," Lily said, with a wisdom that impressed even the priest. Police sirens began to wail in the distance, rapidly approaching. Marlene looked around the church, realizing there was no escape. Her criminal empire was crumbling because of a child she had completely underestimated. "But the documents exist, don't they?" she insisted. "Grace really did hide them somewhere?" Lily smiled, an expression that mixed childish innocence with a cunning that sent a chill down Marlene's spine. "That's something you'll have to find out for yourself," the girl replied, "if you still have time for that." The arrival of the police at the church created a general confusion. Marlene and the armed man were quickly detained, but during the initial chaos, something unexpected happened. Sebastian appeared at the church door, panting and desperate. "Where are the documents?" he shouted, completely ignoring the approaching police officers. "Marlene, did you get the documents?" "Sebastian, run!" Marlene shouted, but it was too late. 2 officers apprehended him before he could escape. Lily watched everything from behind Father Anthony, her mind working quickly. "Father," she whispered, "can you ask the police to let me talk to Sebastian for a minute?" "Why, my child?" "Because I think he can tell us where Mr. Walter and Mr. Jack are." The priest understood the girl's concern and addressed the sergeant in charge of the operation. After a brief conversation, the officer allowed Lily to approach Sebastian, but from a safe distance. "Sebastian," Lily said in her childish voice, "where are my friends?" Sebastian looked at her with a mixture of anger and despair. "Your friends. They're where you should be right now, paying for what they did. What did they do wrong? They just tried to help me." "They found out things they shouldn't have known," Sebastian replied, clearly shaken by his arrest. Now my daughter Emily is going to die because I won't be able to pay for her treatment." Grace, who had returned to the church accompanied by the police, approached the group. "Sebastian, where exactly did you leave Walter and Jack?" "At the abandoned factory. But don't worry about them," Sebastian said bitterly. "My associates received specific orders on what to do if I didn't return in 2 hours." Lily's heart raced. "What orders?" "You've destroyed everything," Sebastian continued, ignoring the girl's question. $15 million in clean operations. Contracts with very powerful people. Do you think they'll just forget about this loss?" The sergeant approached. "Mr. Cole, I need you to tell us exactly how many people are at the factory and if they are armed." Sebastian laughed humorlessly. "2 men, both armed, and you have exactly—" He looked at his watch. "43 minutes before they eliminate the witnesses." "No," Grace cried out. "They did nothing wrong." "Yes, they did. They interfered in business that was none of their concern," Sebastian retorted. "And now they'll pay the price." Lily stepped forward, her mind working at high speed. "Sebastian, what if I tell you where the real documents are? The ones that prove everything you've all done. Do you think that would be enough for your associates to leave Mr. Walter and Mr. Jack alone? What documents? You said you lied about them." "I lied about them being in the church," Lily said calmly. "But I didn't lie about them existing. Grace really did hide important papers before she ran away with me." Grace looked at Lily in surprise, but realized the girl had a plan. "Where are these documents?" the sergeant asked, interested. "In a box buried in the backyard of the house where I used to live, here in Harmony Creek," Lily said, looking directly at Sebastian. "But only I know the exact spot. And I'll only show you if you guarantee that nothing will happen to Mr. Walter and Mr. Jack." "I have no control over my associates," Sebastian said. But his voice betrayed an interest in the documents. "Yes, you do," Lily insisted. "You can call them and tell them you found a better solution, that you've got the papers everyone wants." The sergeant intervened. "Miss Lily, we can't allow you to negotiate with criminals. We will rescue the hostages through a proper police operation." "No," Lily said, surprising everyone with the firmness of her response. "If you go there with the police, they'll hurt Mr. Walter and Mr. Jack before you can save them." "The girl is right," said a new voice behind them. Everyone turned to see a man in a suit approaching. "I'm Detective Castro. I just arrived from Dallas. We've been investigating this organization for months." "Detective," the sergeant said, "we have 2 hostages at the abandoned factory and little time to rescue them." "I know, and I also know that a direct approach would result in the elimination of witnesses," the detective replied. "That's why I brought a specialized team. But first, I need to know more about these documents the girl mentioned." Lily looked at the detective, assessing whether she could trust him. Her years on the streets had taught her to read people quickly. "The documents are real," she finally said, "but they're not where I said they were." "Where are they?" Grace asked, confused. "They're with me," Lily replied simply, pulling a small, crumpled envelope from her pocket. "I've carried them ever since Grace gave them to me before she left me in Harmony Creek." The silence that followed was absolute. Everyone stared at the envelope in Lily's small hands with astonishment. You've had the documents this whole time?" Grace asked, incredulous. "You told me to keep them safe and never show them to anyone, only in a very big emergency," Lily explained. "I think this is a very big emergency." Sebastian tried to get closer, but the officers held him back. "Let me see those documents," he yelled, desperate. "Why?" Lily asked, tilting her head. "So you can see just how much trouble you're in?" Detective Castro held out his hand. "Lily, may I see what's in that envelope?" The girl hesitated, looking at Grace, who nodded encouragingly. Lily handed the envelope to the detective, who opened it carefully. As he examined the contents, the detective's expression changed drastically. "My God," he murmured. "This is much more than we imagined." "What's in there?" the sergeant asked. "Receipts for bank transfers, names of shell companies, offshore account codes," the detective listed, "and a list of names of people involved that goes far beyond Marlene and Sebastian." "What people?" Grace asked. "People in important positions in several cities in the region. Politicians, business owners, even some public officials," the detective answered, his voice grave. "This operation had branches we never even imagined." Sebastian turned completely pale. "If those names get out, a lot of powerful people will want to eliminate anyone who has access to that information. Including Lily and Grace," the detective completed, understanding the gravity of the situation. Lily looked around at the group of adults, realizing she had released information that could put her and Grace's lives in even greater danger. "Did I do a bad thing?" she asked, her small voice betraying fear for the first time. "No, my darling," Grace said, hugging her daughter. "You did the right thing, but now we need to make sure you both stay safe." The detective carefully put the documents away and addressed his team. "Change of plans. This is now a witness protection operation, and we need to rescue the hostages before anyone finds out we have this evidence." "How are we going to do that?" the sergeant asked. "Sebastian is going to help us," the detective said, looking directly at the accountant, "because now that we know the real extent of the operation, he has also become a target. The people mentioned in these documents won't want to leave any witnesses alive." Sebastian understood the situation with terrifying clarity. He had gotten himself into something much bigger than he had imagined, and now his own life was also at risk. "What do you want me to do?" he asked, his previous arrogance replaced by genuine fear. "Call your associates at the factory," the detective instructed. "Tell them you got the documents and you're on your way back. That will buy us time for a coordinated approach." While the adults planned the rescue, Lily held tightly to Grace's hand, finally understanding that her 4-year journey on the streets had prepared her for a moment much bigger than she had ever imagined. "Grace," she whispered, "after all this is over, are we going to stay together forever?" "Forever, my darling," Grace promised, not knowing that this promise would be tested in ways neither of them could foresee. 6 months after the events at the church, life in Harmony Creek had changed drastically for everyone involved in the story. The police operation at the abandoned factory had been successful. Walter and Jack were rescued unharmed, and the 2 armed men were arrested along with Marlene and Sebastian. The documents Lily had kept for 2 years proved to be even more valuable than Detective Castro had initially imagined. The resulting investigation dismantled a corruption network that spanned 3 states, involving money laundering on a scale never before seen in the region. On that sunny November morning, Lily woke up in her new home, a rural property on the outskirts of Harmony Creek that Walter had bought specifically to ensure the safety of the family that had formed so unexpectedly. "Good morning, my darling," Grace said, entering the room with a breakfast tray. "Did you sleep well?" "I did," Lily replied, rubbing her eyes and sitting up in bed. Now 5 years old, she had grown noticeably, not just physically, but in maturity and confidence. "I dreamed about that day at the church. Was it a good dream or a bad one?" "Good, because it was the day I found out I was stronger than I thought." Grace smiled, sitting on the edge of the bed. During these 6 months of living together, she had constantly marveled at her daughter's intelligence and resilience. "You were always strong, Lily. You just needed to discover it." "Grace," Lily said, using her mother's name as she always did when she wanted to talk about something serious, "are you happy living here with Mr. Walter?" The question touched on something Grace had been reflecting on intensely in recent weeks. When the situation with Sebastian and Marlene was resolved, Walter had offered them his home to live in while they decided what to do with their lives. What none of them expected was that this temporary living arrangement would turn into something much deeper. "I'm very happy," she answered honestly. "And you?" "I am. Mr. Walter is kind and makes you smile in a way I've never seen before," Lily observed with her keen perception. "And he looks at you like you're the most important thing in the world." Grace blushed slightly. "Lily, what are you trying to say?" "That maybe you like each other as more than friends," Lily said simply. "And that's not a bad thing. I'd like to have a real family." At that moment, Walter appeared at the bedroom door, holding an official-looking envelope. "Sorry to interrupt, but an important letter came from the courthouse." Grace took the envelope with trembling hands. For the past few months, they had been waiting for the court's decision on Lily's official guardianship and the future of the company after Marlene's crimes. "What does it say?" Lily asked, watching her mother's expression as she read. "It says that the judge has approved our request," Grace said, tears starting to stream down her face. "Lily's guardianship is officially mine, and there are no more legal issues pending regarding her custody." "Does that mean no one can ever take me away from you again?" Lily asked, jumping out of bed to hug Grace. "Never again," Grace confirmed, holding her daughter tightly. Walter watched the scene with emotion, but also with a melancholy that didn't go unnoticed by Lily. "Mr. Walter, why are you sad?" she asked, pulling away from Grace to approach him. "I'm not sad, Lily. I'm happy for you. I'm just, well, thinking that maybe it's time for you two to go on with your own lives." "But we like living here," Lily protested. "And you like having us here too. Why would we have to leave?" Walter knelt to be at the girl's level. "Because you're a family now, Lily. Mother and daughter. Maybe you want privacy to build your own traditions and memories." Lily looked at Grace, then back at Walter, her mind working quickly to find a solution that would satisfy everyone. "Mr. Walter, can I ask you an important question?" "Of course. Do you love Grace?" The direct question left Walter speechless for a few moments. Grace turned red, but didn't protest. She wanted to know the answer too. "Yes," he admitted finally. "I love her very much." "And do you love Mr. Walter?" Lily asked, turning to Grace. "Yes," Grace answered without hesitation. "Very much." "Then why don't you get married?" Lily asked with the simple logic of a child. "Then we can be a real family and no one has to leave." Walter and Grace looked at each other, realizing that a 5-year-old had identified and verbalized what they both had been feeling, but hadn't had the courage to express. "Lily," Grace said gently, "marriage is a very serious thing. It's not just because two people love each other." "Yes, it is," Lily interrupted. "In the stories Father Anthony tells, people who love each other get married and stay together forever, and they build families based on love." Walter smiled, impressed once again by the girl's wisdom. "And if I asked your mother to marry me, would you approve?" "Only if you promise you'll take care of both of us forever, and that you'll never try to send us away," Lily said, negotiating as she had learned to do on the streets. "I solemnly promise," Walter said, extending his hand to seal the deal. Lily shook his hand, then turned to Grace. "And do you promise you'll marry Mr. Walter if he asks?" Grace laughed through her tears. "I promise." "Then it's settled," Lily announced with satisfaction. "Now you can kiss and make wedding plans." 3 months later, in a simple ceremony at the same church where Lily had saved everyone with her intelligence, Walter and Grace were married. Lily was the flower girl, wearing a light blue dress she had chosen herself. Jack, who had become the general manager of the reformed company, was the best man. During the months of investigation, he had proven to be completely innocent of the criminal activities and had helped restructure the business in a completely legal way. Now we're officially a family, Lily said during the reception, holding Walter's and Grace's hands. We always were, Walter replied. We just needed to make it official on paper. Sebastian had received a reduced sentence in exchange for his cooperation with the authorities. His daughter Emily was receiving free treatment through a government program that had been expanded thanks to the evidence of corruption Lily had provided. Paradoxically, the girl he had tried to use as a bargaining chip had ended up saving his daughter. Marlene received a longer sentence and was serving time in a state penitentiary. Walter had visited her once, not for forgiveness, but for closure. She had expressed genuine remorse for her actions, especially for threatening an innocent child. You know something, Lily said to her adoptive parents one night as they watched the stars from the porch of their new home. I think everything happened the way it was supposed to. What do you mean? Grace asked. If I hadn't spent those years on the streets, I wouldn't have learned to pay attention to everything and be brave. If Mr. Walter hadn't been sad after Marlene showed who she really was, he wouldn't have had room in his heart to love us. And if Grace hadn't protected me by hiding those papers, we never would have been able to stop the bad people. Walter hugged Lily, marveling as always at the depth of her insights. You're right. Sometimes the bad things that happen prepare us for the good things that are going to happen. And sometimes, Grace added, the right people appear in our lives exactly when we need them most. Like how I appeared in your lives, Lily asked. Like how we appeared in yours, Walter corrected. It worked both ways. That night, Lily fell asleep between her two parents, finally secure in the knowledge that she belonged somewhere and was unconditionally loved. Her nightmares about her years on the streets had vanished, replaced by dreams of the future she was building with her family. The girl who had once saved a stranger out of pure protective instinct had ended up saving everyone, including herself. And in the small town of Harmony Creek, three people who had found each other under the most unlikely circumstances continued to write their story of love, redemption, and hope, one happy day at a time. The Walter and Barnes Company was renamed Hopeful Brews, symbolizing the new beginning they had all achieved. And every morning, when Lily woke up to the smell of fresh coffee and the sound of her parents' loving voices, she knew for sure that some stories really do have happy endings, especially when they're built on foundations of love, courage, and the determination to protect those we love. If you liked this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story with a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.